Where once were heaving hordes, now emptiness.
So how many people would you fit in here?
We'd get about 500 in here.
500?
Yeah.
But there have been no clubbers and no money for almost a year now. A business at the sharpest end of an economy that suffered its biggest slump in 300 years. And right now, here, there's no end in sight.
Nobody has a clue. And we're basically just running around like headless chickens, wasting all our time.
How important is it to know deadlines or dates that you can work to?
We're doing everything completely blind. It's got, so if we can't understand where the money might flow back in, it's of paramount importance. Otherwise, somewhere along the line, it's going to run out. You can't budget in any way.
There are some numbers we do now know, though. Last year's growth figures that narrowly avoided a double-dip recession, but that's where the even remotely good news ends. Last year, output fell by 9.9%. That's more than double the fall in 2009 at the height of the financial crisis, and worse than 1921 when the UK was hit by the Spanish flu epidemic. In fact, the UK economy has turned in the worst performance since 1709. In the face of this disaster, the government has acted. Staff here, for example, have been furloughed. But you don't have to go too far nowadays before you hit upon some hardship.
I've got no help at all, unfortunately, because I went freelance and there are no grants for anyone if you don't have 2 years of taxes behind you.
So what have you been living off then?
I am relying on donations of food from people and going to food banks. That's all right.
Some sectors are harder hit than others. The Nighttime Industries Association says more than 80% of clubs won't survive past the end of this month without extra help. But there are optimists out there who believe after a year of not spending, a splurge is on its way. One of them is the Bank of England's chief economist, Andy Haldane. Writing in the Daily Mail, he said, "A year from now, annual growth could be in double digits and inflation back on target. The economy is poised like a coiled spring."
What's your fear for the industry?
My fear that we'll basically have nothing left to come back to.
That's a fear that courses through all businesses now. And raising this phoenix from the economic ashes, they say, requires help from the government, and lots of it.
Well, earlier, Paul spoke to the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and asked him whether he shared the optimism of people like Andy Haldane at the Bank of England.
Well, I think the reasons for cautious optimism are obviously the vaccine programme, and that's going well, and pay tribute to everybody involved with that, and that will hopefully allow us to safely and carefully reopen our economy, starting with the roadmap that the Prime Minister will set out the week of February the 22nd. But there are still many people who have either already lost their jobs or are experiencing hardship at the moment, both families and businesses. That's why we've put comprehensive support in place to help all of those people, and we will set out the next stage of our economic response to coronavirus at our budget in early March.
We all appreciate you're not going to tell us what's in the budget, but can businesses at least assume that if they're not able to reopen, you will maintain some level of support for them?
That throughout this crisis, I've tried to provide that support to people to help them through a very difficult time. And my priority has always been jobs, to help protect people's jobs. And we will continue to do that. Of course we will. And we'll set out the next stage of that at the budget in early March.
Individuals are hurting just as much as businesses. Back in the winter spending review, you were criticised by some, including by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, for not telling families who have relied on this extra £20 a week for universal credit, whether or not that will be maintained. Can you appreciate how hard it must be for the poorest families not to know whether or not they're going to lose out on up to £1,000 a year?
Yeah, I can appreciate, of course, how difficult it's been for many families up and down the country over the past year. That's why we've put in place the support that we have. They've been uppermost in my mind. The temporary uplift of universal credit is one part of that, and there are many other things that we've also done. And when I think about next year, some things we've already announced. For example, the national living wage will be increasing above inflation, providing a boost to those in work. But it's right that we look at the exit roadmap that the Prime Minister sets out the week of February 22nd, and our budget and support will be based on that roadmap, and we'll be able to make all those decisions together.
But if you could appreciate that, shouldn't you just be letting them know now that they won't be losing out?
Well, I think it's right that we put in place support to help people. That's what we've done throughout this crisis. And universal credit is just one of those. As I said, the national living wage is going up next year by above inflation amount. That will be worth £350 to someone working on the national living wage. We've put in place support to help people get new skills, to get new jobs. But we look at everything together based on the roadmap that the Prime Minister sets out, and budget is the right time to do.
On universal credit, on free school meals, who's doing a better job at holding you to account, Keir Starmer or Marcus Rashford?
No, I think we are putting in place the support to help vulnerable families. That's what we've always been guided by throughout this crisis. Whether it's the winter support package to help families through the winter period, whether it's the other assistance we're providing across the board, getting laptops to children right now who are not able to be at school. We always have vulnerable families uppermost in our minds throughout this difficult period, and they will continue to be so.
A good answer, but not an answer to the question I asked. Marcus Rashford or Keir Starmer?
I think we're happy to hear and talk to everybody. I think all of us are hearing both from our constituents and around the country, what people are experiencing through this crisis. Everyone's experiencing it in a slightly different way. For some people, it's the job that they've lost that's the most acute problem. For other families, it's grappling with homeschooling and access to laptops. But where we can, we're trying to make a difference and trying to step in and provide that support.
Now, look, travelling around the country for the last year, businesses all over, by and large, have praised you and praised the support measures that you've put in place. But the one group that are consistently getting in touch with me are the self-employed, the forgotten freelancers who have been excluded from the same level of help. Some saying they've received nothing, some saying it's just been universal credit. We're a year into this crisis now. Any savings have been burnt through. Some are facing losing their homes. Why haven't you been able to help them to the same level? Do you think that's fair?
Well, we've tried to do as much as we can. And I said right at the beginning when we were trying to put in place support for those who are self-employed that it was tricky to do. And actually that was acknowledged by everyone at the time. Because we don't have the right information on what exactly people's circumstances are, that makes it hard to design policy in a way that is as targeted as you'd like it to be, that protects the taxpayer against fraud in many circumstances. But I am proud that our support for those who are in self-employment is, I think, more comprehensive and generous than almost any other country. We've spent almost £20 billion helping almost 3 million people who are self-employed. And I appreciate that not everyone feels that they've got help in exactly the way that they would like. But there are lots of other things we've done as well, whether it's bounce-back loans, whether it's changes to the welfare system, whether it's tax deferrals. There are lots of mortgage holidays. Across the board, there are lots of things going on, and I'm hopeful that at least one of those will be able to provide support.
Chancellor, thank you very much.